Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome here as we bring you coverage of race number 3 of Season 4 of the Dark Horse Racing Series presented by Troy Lee Designs here at the Magic Mile, New Hampshire Motor Speedway. Now, normally when we're in the 4th season of a series, we usually are at a track we've been to previously on the schedule. We have stats, we have a little bit of notes that we're able to glean from previous races. Not the case. First time New Hampshire makes its way onto the schedule. Seth Cole alongside Scott Rankin. Now, Scott, you were able to take to the racetrack for a few laps here. What are some of the things these drivers are going to have to deal with here today in this 150-lapper?
Well, first and foremost, it is a short track. Let's keep that in mind. The turns, they are tight. They're rather flat. There is just that touch of banking. Not a huge deal of banking. Now, in the qualifying setups, something that the drivers can do is they can get down to the second groove. That's going to provide the optimum qualifying line. I was just watching Robert Maleska III. Well, he's been a winner already so far in this season. He messed up his qualifying run. He didn't get the optimum qualifying run. What did he do wrong? Had a spin on his first qualifying lap. Reset the car, started again. What he was trying to do was just push the car down too low, too early. Qualifying setup, you can get to the second groove, the second dash lane on the track. Race up, you won't be able to get down there, and he just made a mistake. He messed up his momentum, and it wouldn't have been a good second lap, so he opted to reset, go again. Look, this track is tricky. Overtaking is gonna be a nightmare. The drivers, I was actually listening into them during the practice session and what they were talking about. They basically said it's gonna be so difficult to overtake. You add in the aero wash and the aero effects, and it's pretty much going to be null and void. You have to get that move done before you get to the corners, because the outside grooves are going to be able to hold a little bit more momentum. So, controlling, I mean, that's what these Indy cars are all about, right? Is controlling the aero weight to the car behind, taking away their ability to generate downforce, generate grip, generate speed. That's going to be what it's all about tonight.
See a couple of drivers still sitting at the entrance to pit road. Kobe Moore in the 15. We're now looking at last week's winner from our race at Road America. That is Henry Bennett. And I mean, obviously for some of these drivers, they're going to wait till the very end to be able to put down their lap time. You saw a couple of names jump up to the top of the board there. Jim Brooks was up there by about 44 one-thousandths of a second over Maleska, but then Charles T jumped up to the top. Rick Ravon right now currently sits as the pole sitter for this race, but still some big names that have not gone out there and taken time just yet. You know, obviously, coming into this race, as we've said, there's a lot of unknowns for drivers and commentators alike. But as you said, with it being so difficult to pass, drivers are going to have to kind of adapt their racing style, I think, in order to be able to make sure that they're going to be able to make passes, because it almost seems like the old adage that you would have at a short track. You qualify well, you're going to run well, because you're going to be able to maintain track position.
Yeah, but that adage, I mean, that really applies to stock cars more than anything. We talked at length last week about the differences between the stock cars and the differences between an Indy car. You know, lighter cars, the Indy cars, a lot more downforce, open wheels, meaning damage is much, much more risky because it's going to happen to a far more vital part of the car. Where you have more downforce, you have more downforce generating structures, they are so vital. The tiniest little nick to one of those structures is going to lose you a big chunk of your overall downforce, because it's, especially if it's at the front of the car, it's affecting the way that the air is flowing over the entirety of the car. So keep that in mind. These drivers ultimately, normally when I come to a track like this, first thought is always preservation, preservation, preservation. Get yourself to that last pit stop window in a reasonable spot. Again, reasonable, making sure that you are able to generate that assault on the leaders if you've got the pace. But at the same time, if you get to that last pit stop and you haven't got a clean car, what was the whole point of running this race? That is what the driver's target's going to be tonight. I expect cautions. And this series is relatively clean. This series is right up there in terms of Indy cars. The drivers are phenomenal. But it's the nature of this track. It's the nature of the cars. It's the nature of the overtaking, the driving style, everything that's required from the drivers. This is a high-intensity track. They don't get a lot of a break around here. From the laps that I was doing, I was starting to feel the wear in my arms. And I've only got a lower-end wheel. You know, so these guys with higher-end wheels are going to be struggling a hell of a lot more.
Rick Ravon, who has started out the season with back-to-back top 10s, 6th in the season opener at Michigan, and 3rd place last week at Road America. He is going to be your pole sitter here tonight at New Hampshire. Alongside of him is going to be the 15 of Kobe Moore. Now, so far this season, we've seen Maleska go to victory lane at Michigan, Henry Bennett taking the checkers last week at Road America. What do you think the odds are with some of these names we see up here qualifying towards the front of us, going 3 for 3, and different drivers finding victory lane in the first 3 races of the season?
Well, yeah, I mean, have a look at where they qualified. The highest of those 2 names is Henry Bennett in P6. P6. Remember how difficult I said it is going to be to make those overtakes tonight as well. That's not going to be easy. Maleska, remember how I said he stuffed up his first qualifying lap? And I said that would be crucial? Initially when he set his lap, it actually didn't look too bad. He was sitting at about 2nd, about 3rd, so I thought, oh yeah, the guy's still managed to generate some reasonable pace. As qualifying's gone on, he has popped out P9. Don't underestimate that. That's on the inside lane. Go ahead, Seth, sorry.
No, you're good, I was just going to point out the fact, too, that's a lot of traffic to work with, and he kind of, in the head of Robert Maleska III after last week at Road America, was up there in the top 3 pretty much the entirety of that day, had those mistakes mid-race, and actually DNF'd from the event. He's going to obviously be driving frustrated here today, trying to defend his championship, and last thing you want to do is start this thing out with a whole bunch of traffic in front of you.
Yeah, and a whole bunch of drivers that he's not used to running around. You got to remember, so far with his championship, we've had Michigan and we've had Road America, and at both of those races, he's been right up at the top the entire time. At Michigan, he had 4 drivers around him, I think, in that lead pack of 5, and I think he was running at the back of that the entire time. Not really racing any of these guys. The guys that are around him now know that he's quick, know that he is going to be looking to continue that championship dominance. Last week at Road America, he was running in the top 3, and he was running quite closely with them until he made that mistake. So he hasn't driven around a lot of the drivers that he's in and around at the moment. I'm looking at names like Bronson Stafford. I mean, Paulo Hernandez, he was right there with last time. Jimmy Drennan, I believe that's a new name to the series. Henry Bennett, he will know how to drive around. Charles Teed, I believe he'll know how to drive around. Kobe Moore's right there as well. So there's a lot of names here that he will know how to drive around. But just that difference in some of these driving styles is really going to implicate potentially how early this race goes. Plus, he's in the mid-pack. The ability for something to go wrong escalates the further back you are.
Well, here we go. 150 miles, 150 laps await these drivers. The first time that the Dark Horse Racing Series goes green at New Hampshire.
Yeah, just keep your eyes on where these guys are starting to pick up. You can see somebody already, I believe that's Charles Teed, trying to get down to the low line. It's just not going to work down there. You need to look after the tires. You're probably going to be running the high line. Think about momentum, the amount of load that's generated and put through these tires. You've got to be careful. You've got to look after them. You've got to try and get the car turned in. Heavy fuel loads. This race and this track is going to develop as these fuel loads burn off. That is going to be so crucial. It's something you don't generally see with IndyCar.
There's something right there I think we're going to have to keep an eye on as well, is the ability to be able to avoid a driver when they have to lift out of the throttle on corner exit. We saw right there, Jimmy Drennan was looking to the inside of Bronson Stafford for 6th, could not make the corner without getting out of the throttle, and Maleska the third had to jerk the wheel hard left to avoid running to the back of him.
Yeah, and that's tires. That's exactly what I said about risk versus reward right now for Maleska. He has got to make sure that he's able to make passes, but at the same time, if it's too risky, like the driver that he's going to attempt to overtake, they're running their best race. They're right where they should be in terms of position. He's not. You know, he's got championship implications. He's running right up the front. Bronson Stafford, remember as well, had a phenomenal race at Michigan due to the fuel run. So he is right up there in championship implications, although it's not on outright speed. So keep that in the back of your mind as well.
And definitely you would think that a strategy race would play into his wheelhouse with what we've seen him be able to do in the first 2 races. Only 4 points behind Henry Bennett for the current championship points lead, as some exchanging up here for the second position. Rick Ravon is gone. He's opened up over a second. Back to Kobe Moore and Matt Wagner, who have exchanged the second position about 2 or 3 times here in the last 2 laps.
Yeah, just keep your eyes on things. You know, it's a short track, so pace is going to be, anytime you enter a corner side by side, neither of you are taking the optimal line through the corner. That means you're both giving up momentum. You're both giving up either entry or exit speed to try and get that overtake done. A lot of the time, the reason that you see drivers single file out is because everyone wants to take the optimal line. It's about risk management. The drivers are just sitting there in the head going, if I try and fight for every single position, every single lap of this race, there are going to be positions that all of a sudden get a mile away from me because I'm racing too hard. Sometimes it takes that little bit of use of the head just to see how things are going. I'm keeping my eyes on the front couple, though, because Charles Teed's on the move as well.
He is. He's going to get around Kobe Moore for the third position. Now Henry Bennett looks to the inside of the 15, who is way wide there through 3 and 4, and you know, obviously we're talking about tires. Another thing that drivers were kind of wondering about was would they be dealing with the aero push? And you kind of combine those two things together. That's going to, as this run goes on, make it much more difficult for these drivers to turn off the corner. And we know just how sensitive these cars are with the open wheel style. Obviously the suspension's more susceptible. Oh, we got a spinner! Jimmy Drennan there off of turn 4. Caution's going to come out as he nosed it into the inside wall in the front straightaway. Fortunately, nobody else hit him.
That's lucky for everybody else. Jimmy Drennan was another name that I was just sort of keeping my eyes on. He got all the way down there on the low line, tried to flick it back a couple times. So something, remember back, I'm not sure if I mentioned it yet, I mentioned it before we actually went live. If you get down to that first groove, which is exactly where Jimmy Drennan was running there's a little bit of anti-banking, if you will. So it's banking that goes in the opposite direction. So you can't actually run in that first groove. You come down to the second groove, really nice spot to run it around the track. But if you come down to that first groove, it's going to tilt the car in the other direction. The car doesn't want to turn when that sort of happens. It's called off-camber in terms of road courses, but ovals, it's a little bit different, so inventing my own terms here.
And you know, we saw that there too. I mean, you see right there, he's trying to save the race car, feels it's out of trouble, or feels that it's in trouble rather, and you saw how the car just kind of jerked to the right for a brief moment. I think that's exactly what you were talking about there, him hitting that section of the course, and it turned his car the direction it did not want to go. Again, though, very fortunate that it took place with him down the lower portion of the racetrack. He only was the one that spun down to the inside wall, and fortunately New Hampshire has somewhat spacious straightaways, so as long as that car stays out of harm's way, very unlikely that other drivers are going to get gathered up. So very lucky we got away with a single car incident there.
Really interesting decisions. Have a look at what's happened in terms of our pit lane strategy as well. We've got about half the field, more than half the field, I think, coming down pit lane at this point in time. Robert Maleska is one of the takers, actually. So it's pretty much everyone out in front of Maleska. Actually, I'm looking at Stafford. So it's Polo Hernandez up, didn't stop. There's one car just in behind Polo Hernandez, which is Jim Herrick. So Jim Herrick has taken the opportunity to grab a whole bunch of track position. These drivers... Remember, short track style strategy. So track position is king. However, someone from Bronson Stafford, they're sacrificing... He says, I'm not going to be able to win this one in terms of outright pace again. But he's aware of that. You don't have to be the fastest driver on track sometimes to win the race. You need to have the fuel strategy. He's got the fuel strategy in mind. He's pit, grabbed fuel, grabbed a little bit of extra tires. He might be in a really good spot when we go green again.
We'll be restarting back in the 8th position as 7 drivers did not come to pit lane here under this caution. Some of the other notable names that came to pit lane, Jim Brooks, Nick DeGroot, the Season 2 champion, was on pit road as well. Jimmy Drynan did come down pit lane. He is scored 1 lap down, and he is a fast repair already in the hole. So he cannot afford to cause any more damage to that machine, or that's pretty much his race over with. Everybody else still has their fast repair. Now, these drivers only did about 10 laps there on that green flag run, but we know how abrasive this track is on those tires. With Bronson Stafford back there getting those fresh tires, we talked about at the top of the program, a lot of drivers commenting on the inability to be able to make passes, be able to set up and generate a run, to be able to make a move for positions. Does these 10-lap fresher tires kind of now give that option to guys like Stafford, Maleska, Brooks on back?
Yeah, so let's delve into some of the statistics. I believe we're actually probably going to be going green this time by. Yeah, there it is. So I was out there for about 5 laps. Front right was burned 4%. So you're burning roughly, just a little bit under 1% a lap. That's a lot of wear for an IndyCar. But then again, these tires last a fair bit longer. They're not a stock car tire whereby the heat degrades the tire's performance as well. They're not as big a tire, so therefore, the ability of the tires to just sort of fall off is bigger because there's a much larger contact patch in terms of the tires. So yes and no, but they're going to be better off. Bronson Stafford will have a view on the long strategy. Robert Maleska's done it because from the position that he's in. Yeah, that was a close one.
Yeah, right up on the back of Jim Herrick as he's trying to hold off Robert Maleska III. So things getting tight back here with the drivers on fresh tires.
Jim Herrick, you got to remember, Jim Herrick is out of sequence. This is a driver that was running towards down 15th or so area before, opted to not take the pit stop just purely because he gains a ton of track position. That means it's risk factor for him. It's risk factor he's got to manage. He's doing a great job, though, and ultimately, Maleska right now is having an issue trying to pass Bronson. He is burning up a lot of those tires. When you get down on that lower line, you're turning more. You're putting more turning input in, and that means the tires turn more, and the contact patch isn't as neutral to the direction you're trying to take the car. What that means is the tire starts skipping sideways across the road. That's what generates a lot of the tire wear.
It was interesting because I was talking with our broadcast colleague Matthew Rodriguez before this race as well, and the numbers we were given as far as fuel are about 38 to 40 laps, depending on how much draft you get or do not get during the course of the run. We weren't really told what the tires looked like at the end of that 38 to 40 lap run. And we were kind of bouncing around the idea of the possibility that some of these guys, by the time they get to the end of that window, the tire might be worn down so much we could end up seeing some tire explosions here at New Hampshire. Your thoughts on that?
I don't think so. I think a lot of these drivers will be aware that tires are a risk, and they'll just look after them a little bit. Like, I actually thought Maleska was going to be about to clear Bronson Stafford, so let's keep our eyes. This is the window that we need to keep our eyes on, because this is the tail end of the pack that didn't stop, didn't take tires, didn't take fuel, and the leaders are the guys that did. So Stafford and Maleska are just going at it. Maleska cannot get this move done. This is one of your premium drivers. Oh, we might actually get it this time by.
Not
No, he
quite going to
can't.
be able to. Yeah, it just seems like, I don't know if it's that Stafford's able to get back to the throttle a lot sooner, or if Maleska's afraid that the car is going to push up on that inside line, and so he's having to feather it a lot more on that inside line.
Combination of both. Combination of both. The other factor is that just by being on the high line, the radius of the corner is much wider. In terms of physics, the shorter the radius of the corner, we all know this, right? Because we all deal with this in our day-to-day lives in terms of driving around. The shorter the radius of the corner, the slower you have to go. So what Stafford's doing is he's going to give up. The shortest way around the corner, the quickest way around the corner is the shortest path, right? The shortest path is that lower path, and Maleska's just opted to just send it here, send a lot of pace through the early phase of the corners, he gets the move done. Now he sets his eyes on Jim Herrick. So the higher radius means he can carry more speed through the corner, and Bronson Stafford is scrubbing his tires less. There'll be less steering input to get the car around that phase. Yeah, it's a little bit longer. Yeah, you're giving up a little bit in terms of pace. Wow, look at that pace difference. Gets by Stafford and he disappears up the road, does Maleska.
Yeah, he did. He opened up about 4, now 5 car lengths between himself and the 61, and I'm almost wondering if that might have possibly been Bronson Stafford saying, all right, you've gotten around me, now I'm going to go back into tire conservation mode. I think he was spending those last couple of laps trying to keep the 91 in his rearview mirror. Now that he's in his windshield, that strategy has changed for the 61.
100%, and you've got to be flexible in terms of the way that you build that strategy up and the way that you race other guys as well. Yeah, you want to race him hard because this is effectively on corrected pit lane strategy. That's the lead of the race. So Bronson Stafford's doing everything he needs to do, but at the same time, it's like, I'm going to race you hard. The instant you get there, the instant you've got the move done, okay, no worries. You've got the move done. That is smart race car driving. I'm not going to just hand it to you. You have to come and take it, but once you take it, I'm going to make sure we both get through this okay. Really good job by Bronson Stafford there.
We're watching last week's winner, Henry Bennett, try and reel in Charles Teed for third. The driver that was chasing Bennett most of Road America last week was Polo Hernandez. He's right behind him in 5th place. And I was watching Bennett coming off the corner a couple of laps ago, and I want to go back to the point I was going to try and make back during that first run just before the drying and spin. With the combination of the aero push these drivers might be experiencing, as well as the fact that obviously that right front is taking a beating. We've got over 110 degrees track heat out here for these drivers here today. It's going to, the longer the run goes on, be more difficult for these drivers to turn off the corner, especially off of turn 4. And even Henry Bennett was really close there to almost brushing the wall off of 4 a couple of laps ago. With the fact that these open wheel cars have the suspension exposed, just how much would a scrape or a hit into that outside wall affect this car for the remainder of the run? I mean, would it be an immediate have to dive onto pit road?
They can, if it's a direct side-to-side contact with the wall. No, not necessarily, but any other style of contact, yes. Yes, it is going to have to be. The problem with the suspension exposed, the tires have camber, right? Camber is the tire leaning in towards the center of the car. Then you've got toe, which is longitudinally, so front to back. The tire's either pointed towards the front of the car or pointed towards the rear of the car, right? The leading or the tailing edge of the tire. So that's toe. And you've got caster. There was a really good description of caster, and I've completely and utterly forgotten it now. Actually, it's the angle of the steering rack towards the... That's basically the suspension settings. Then you have how stiff the suspension is, how much pressure it's forcing the car down into the road with, which generates more contact patch. The stiffer the suspension, the more of that tire is being forced into the road, but the less ability the car has to react to bumps. Softer suspension rides bumps better, but generates less mechanical grip because it's forcing less of the car in. So there's all of those factors going on. Any contact with any pieces of that means that that section of the car is not doing its job properly. NASCAR's stock cars, they've got a shell over the outside, a protective shell. They take a scrape towards the wall, that aero pocket sort of gets a little bit of effect, but they're okay. They're generally fine. You can keep driving them away without a big impact, so...
All 19 drivers that took the green flag to start this race still running, 18 of them on the lead lap. Jimmy Drynan currently 1 lap down as Kobe Moore looks to hold off Jim Herrick for the 7th position. We looked just moments ago at your race leader. 1.2 seconds back to Matt Wagner is Rick Ravon. And, you know, last week, Henry Bennett headed into that second race 10th in the point standings. After the win, he jumped up 9 spots in the standings to the points lead. right now, with Rick Ravon running where he is, he's only 14 points out of the points lead. If he's able to close out the deal, I know there's still a long ways to go, so really can't speculate. But let's say that he does close this out with the win. We could be looking at our third points leader in as many races.
Yeah, exciting prospect. I mean, we look back at last season and just the whole sort of deal with Robert Maleska. He basically just ran away with the championship. There was no one really else in the picture for the bulk of it because he just won so many races. Is it the drivers have changed? No, if you actually have a look through the drivers roster, a lot of these drivers were actually there last season. I just think it's the track layout, and a lot of these drivers have gone away during the off-season going, hey, Maleska's won this thing. We are going to put more time, more effort in. We want to take the challenge to him. We want to dethrone him. Because that was embarrassing. We don't want that happening again. And look at this. I mean, this is such a big response from the drivers. This is phenomenal.
Yeah, it definitely is. On board here with Matt Wagner, who is now all of a sudden starting to eat into the lead that Rick Ravon had built. What was about 1.3 seconds has been cut down to less than a second between these two. And Matt Wagner was a guy a lot of people were looking at last week at Road Americas because we got into like the final 10 laps and he was laying down some of the fastest consistent laps of the race. Wagner so far this season has 2 top 10s in the first 2 races, a top 5 as well. He is in a 3-way tie for 7th place, only 26 points out of the points lead. So keep an eye on him because Matt Wagner is yet to go to victory lane this season, was a 2-time winner last year, winning the season opener and the season finale.
Also won the one-off Indy 500, did he not?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, so, Wagner's got pedigree, he's got prestige there, he's got the ability to win these races. He knows what it takes. Can he take the step up and win the championship? That's the next big question, because winning one race, yeah, he's proved he can do that. Winning multiple races, or when he's not able to win the race, taking a bank of points ahead, that's a big, big factor. You gotta remember, sometimes you just cannot win the race. It's just not gonna come to you. When that happens, you've got to make sure that you risk assess, that you fuel strategy assess, you assess everything and you go, okay, I can't win this race. Can I grab a 3? Can I grab a top 5? Make sure that when my rivals are also having a bad day, I'm grabbing as many points as I can, because a lot of the time, winning the race, yeah, that's a great job, but the championship battle that's going on in behind them is so much more important. If you outscore your rivals at every single round, bingo, championship.
Now remember, 7 drivers stayed out there under that first and only caution up to this point. If you look at our top 8, all 7 of them are still in the top 8. The only one that's broken in on the fresh tires is Robert Maleska III. He's currently up to the 6th position. Everybody else that came to pit road, they're still mired back there 9th on back to 18th. Is this telling us that the fresh tires don't necessarily give you that advantage to be able to cut your way through the field, or is it the fact that these guys are off sequence? They're basically just kind of running their own race as opposed to those other drivers that decide to stay out. As a matter of fact, Matt Wagner hits pit road now from the 2nd spot.
I was about to say, yeah, we're a couple laps away from sort of seeing that, and the benefit of a safety car period is that you can save a boatload of fuel. Look, it's difficult because Jim Herrick is definitely the cork in the bottle. He's definitely holding up, but he's not too far back off of Covey Moore. But there's a whole bunch of guys up ahead of him that have just gone ahead and bolted. So the guys that are mired back in the pack, they're fighting to get through, but at the same time, they're not really able to make a whole bunch of inroads. Bronson Stafford's lost a whole bunch of... It could be that Stafford was further ahead than he should have been in that sequence as well. Covey Moore's just come on the radio, said he's coming to pit road as well, so Matt Wagner's going to pop out in the middle of this battle. He actually rejoins...
You got a caution. I believe we've had an incident involving the 99 of Jimmy Dryden again. This time it was off of turn 2 and onto the back straightaway. This was just when Charles Teed had hit pit lane. Rick Ravon and Matt Wagner had just completed their pit stops and have fallen a lap down. Obviously, this is not what they wanted to see. They wanted to have this thing completely cycle around. We'll go back and see what happened to the 99. Second caution and second one that's been brought out courtesy of Jimmy Dryden.
Well, that's contact actually with Bronson Stafford. That is... I don't know, remember when I was talking about side-to-side contact? Well, there's your side-to-side contact. It's so light, though, I don't think either of them are going to have massive damage.
And it's kind of surprising there that I'm not really sure what happened with Dryden after the initial contact, because they both kept it going, facing the correct direction, and all of a sudden off of 2, that thing just snapped.
So he's gotten unsettled whether or not there is a slight amount of damage to Dryden's side pod, and that's creating an aero wake, which is on the loaded side of the car. He can't get the rear to stabilize itself immediately afterwards. The other thing is, Stafford's created a hole in the air right at that point, which means he's got less ability to keep the car, under his control. So.
You see right there, he did have the car counter-steered, trying to save it. The back end just stepping out on him. So the second caution comes out here on lap 42. And I'm not exactly certain what the situation is going to be for drivers like Rick Ravon and Matt Wagner, who were running first and second just before that caution came out and just before they hit pit lane. I mean, are these guys... Well, I'm not sure if they're going to be able to get a wave around here. I don't know what the situation is going to be for them.
Because the whole field at this point is at the back end of their fuel strategy, so everyone needs to come in and grab fuel. So the guys that have pitted will come out, and then they'll be at the lead. They'll be directly behind the pace car, so they will get the wave around. Additionally, Lucky Dog rule has been enabled, which is not an IndyCar rule, it's a NASCAR rule. So Matt Wagner did pick up the Lucky Dog there, so he gets the option to take another free pit here, whereas the other guys that did pit around him don't get that opportunity. I mean, if you're in Matt Wagner's shoes, you're already going to be at the tail end of the field. I'd probably just come down pit road and take that extra stop.
Yeah, top off the fuel tank there, because be starting shotgun on the field regardless of whether you come down or not. Rick Ravon right now being scored on the lead lap as he is ahead of race leader Henry Bennett, and behind the pace car. We'll see he'll probably go around, get his lap back when the lights go out atop the pace car, indicating 1 lap to green. So our top 5 changed up quite a bit from what we had just before that caution waved. Henry Bennett, the race leader, Polo Hernandez in second, so they're first and second once again. Oleska there in the third position, so that's basically your top 3 from the first half of last week's race at Road America. You've got it here again 1 week later at New Hampshire with Covey Moore and Jim Herrick completing the top 5 here for this upcoming restart.
What a strategy play this is from Robert Maleska. He's played himself into things in terms of fuel strategy. He's played himself. You remember how I said, coming down early, he was mired back in traffic, so he needed to create an overlap somehow. Now, because he saved that extra fuel, he's run that extra distance, he's had guys pit from in front of him who are now going to be right at the tail end of the field and have to fight their way through. All of a sudden, the road ahead of him has just opened himself up, and he now pops out. He's going to be P3 on this restart. That's a huge strategy play. That's some heads-up pit lane strategy from Robert Maleska.
Definitely is. He started this race back in the 9th position, and less than 50 laps in, he's worked his way up 6 spots to the 3rd spot. But they're all going to be chasing last week's winner and the points leader, Henry Bennett, as he will go right up against that safer barrier through 3 and 4 and lead us back to the green flag. Looks like Jimmy Dryden actually took the wave around under that caution as well. He did not come to pit lane despite bringing out the yellow. And so all 19 cars are going to be on the lead lap here. Actually, correction, there's Jimmy Dryden in the 99 there, down on the inside of the back straightaway, going to go a lap down again.
He went to pit lane as well, so he's going to trap himself a lap down. He's going to be the first car a lap down, so he's grabbed his pit stop as well, so... Tough night for Jimmy Dryden. He got himself into a reasonable position in terms of the field that last green flag run, and then, contact with Bronson Stafford, it happens sometimes. Sometimes the race just isn't in your favor. We're in an interesting phase of the race, though, here, Seth, because all of a sudden we got Bennett, Hernandez, and Maleska battling it out for the lead, and this is the highest Maleska's been. He's definitely got the pace. He's definitely been one of the few cars that's been able to overtake. Now... can he do it against guys that are running at the head of the field? That's going to be an interesting prospect entirely.
Yeah, all 3 of these drivers, your top 3, started this race from outside of the top 5. Bennett, the highest starter, in 6th. Hernandez from 10th, and Maleska from 9th. So they have picked up anywhere from 5 to 8 spots since the drop of the green flag, been able to work their way up here to the front of the field. Now, we know for certain that these guys are going to have to be on pit lane at least 2 more times before the conclusion of this race. one thing we were given before this race took place is some of these guys, they've got a target lap in mind. If they can make it to lap 113, it would then be their final pit stop of the day. Still a long ways to go, but I guarantee you the strategizing on what to do before you get to lap 113, that's already in the works for a number of these guys.
Yeah, and it's about playing yourself backwards in terms of pit lane strategy. You don't start the race and go, well, I can get 40 laps from here and I can get 40 laps from there. It gets me to 80. Then another 40 lap gets me to 120. No, you actually start at 150 and you work your way backwards. And IndyCar, obviously not green white checkers, so you don't have to play that scenario out in your head. So you go 50, 150, all right, 110, 70, 30. So long as I can find a pit window in there that shifts me beyond those lap numbers, that's what I'm targeting. And with a caution right here, that's exactly what it's done. That 10 lap run at the start that we had, 11 laps before the drivers come down pit road, that's perfect. That plays slightly further into the pit lane strategy. That opens up a few more options. Now at 44, neutralizes that pit lane strategy once again. These guys come back down pit road, they get that top off, gets them through to lap 84-ish. All of a sudden, now they've got flexibility in terms of when their last stop is.
Well, let's go trying to get the second position here from Polo Hernandez. We saw him kind of doggedly on the inside line trying to pick up a spot from Bronson Stafford earlier on in this race, and again trying to run a groove lower than what looks like the preferred line for these guys into the corner to try and get up to the runner-up position. I want to touch again just a little bit, embellish a little bit more on what you were just talking there about with the whole working the race backwards. I mean, you know, there's a lot of series, a lot of leagues where drivers will have spotters that are keeping track of not only them on the racetrack, but they'll also work the calculators and do that strategic, that strategic part of the race for the driver. That way it allows the driver to just keep his car clean and be out there race and whatnot.
So driving.
Yeah, so how difficult is it as a driver, if you don't have the luxury of a spotter, to not only make sure that you handle your duties as a race car driver, but also be your own crew chief and have to work the numbers, all the while trying to keep yourself up there and maintain your track position?
So in that sort of a situation, yellow flag's actually going to come out.
Out of caution, that's Jeff Heisong in the 18 on the front stretch.
So this is really interesting because we've been green for, remember the first run was 11 laps, we've been green for about the same period again. You know the other interesting factor about coming down pit road here? It's lap 57. By the time they get to the pit road, it'll be lap 58. That gets us to 98. All of a sudden, there's only 10 laps you're going to find in terms of fuel. Can you save that distance over about 100 laps? I think you can. Yeah, so getting back to the spotter, it's not necessarily a spotter in these terms. The drivers will have automated spotters. The whole role of a spotter, car inside, car one back has a huge run on you. So the manual spotters, the teammates of these guys, effectively, their crew, will still be telling guys, hey, the car behind you's got to run, hey, he's probably going to look to the inside here. But the drivers are generally quite efficient at managing that on their own. No way, Bennett doesn't take here? Bennett doesn't take a stop? Everyone else behind him is going to take one? I think Bennett has made a mistake here.
A couple of other drivers are going to stay out with him. Nick DeGroot, Mike Telly are amongst those. And as we look there at the onboard, that was with our pole sitter, Rick Ravon, who made the contact with Jeff Heisong off of turn 4. Of course, Rick was back in traffic after he had to take the wave around under the last caution, that untimely yellow, trapping him a lap down after he'd made a green flag pit stop.
Such is life. Anyway, back to the conversation about pit strategy and spotters. So, yeah, look, a lot of that still is going to be automated. The benefit of having guys running the numbers alongside of you means that, A, you can just focus on exactly what you're doing. B, you can have somebody that says, hey, I need you to burn this much fuel for this long, and then you're going to pit on this exact lap. That's really good. You can just follow instructions as a driver. That's what the drivers do in real life. They're told, you need to run this lap pace, you need to run it for this many laps, and doing it, you need to burn this amount of fuel. If you can't do any one of those three, you tell me, and we'll adjust the strategy. right? The drivers are there to drive. That's how it works in real life. They drive, they don't do the strategy. I mean, Fernando Alonso is a different kettle of fish. He makes up his own strategy on the fly, and generally makes a strategy for the rest of the team whilst he's at it as well. But when you're doing that as a driver, when you're planning all the strategy and running all the numbers like that, yeah, sometimes what will happen is when you're on a straight line, you'll just jink a little bit either side because you're looking at numbers on your second monitor, because you're trying to get fuel readouts, because you're trying to do up the math to get targets. The math you can do all on your head. You have to be a mathematician to be a successful car driver on your own without a crew. The math itself is actually relatively easy, so don't be put off by that. But yeah, the guys with crew, whilst they may not necessarily be told burn this much fuel, run this lap pace, pit on this lap, they will be told you need to burn this much fuel, your pit window is going to be about here, because they're not paid to do this. Remember, they are just amateurs, a little bit pro-am in essence, but they're not going to be paid to do this at such a high level. They do it, and through practice they get better at it. That's basically how that works. So they do the best job that they can. At the end of the day, having somebody else alongside of you that can help you manipulate the race, that can help you keep track of what other drivers are doing, it's always a benefit.
Well, we had ourselves a total of 7 drivers stay out under this caution flag. Henry Bennett, Nick DeGroot, Mike Tellier going to be the top 3 when we go back green. Gary Corley lines up 4th. Rick Ravon and Matt Wagner, they stayed out. They'll line up 5th and 6th. And Charles Teed will line up in the 7th position. The first car off pit road that came to pit lane under this yellow, Polo Hernandez, will restart back in 8th, followed by Robert Molesky III and Jim Herrick.
Spicy. So, think about it. 7 seems to be the number that we're getting tonight. 7 seems to be the number of cars that are staying out. Matt Wagner was looking for a big launch on that race. That's why he was down low. He was trying to be able to spot the leaders to make sure that you can time the jump. He's done a really good job actually on that.
Battle for the lead maybe here through 1 and 2. DeGroot trying to close up. Battle for 4th place, Rick Ravon along the outside of Gary Corley. He's going to make that pass work, so Corley starting to drop back now into the 5th position, and he'll fall into the clutches of Matt Wagner in that 11 that you were just talking about.
And this is crucial. So something else I didn't actually touch on was that all the drivers that got trapped that lap down in terms of pit strategy, where they took the wave around, they were actually at the tail end of the pack. They had no option in terms of where that sucked them out. So you're looking at Rick Ravon, you're looking at Matt Wagner, you're looking at Charles Teed, all of these sorts of guys, when they took the wave around, they're at the back. So they had to stay out there. They needed to buy all of that free track position back. That means they're still fuel compromised though, so keep your eyes on that.
Ravon trying to now work his way back up into the top 3 on the back bumper of Mike Tellier. And you remember we saw that Molesky III, when he was on the fresh tires, he was trying the inside line. Rick Ravon's actually going half a groove to a groove higher than some of the guys in front of him going into these corners. So you have to wonder if some other drivers back there, like Molesky III, might notice that and might try venturing up to that top side to try and make some forward progress.
Yeah, make sure that you venture up there nice and early, especially when there's no overtake that's relevant on you as well. You want to get that knowledge, get the feel for what the car... Ooh, my word, apparently I haven't had enough sleep lately. I cannot stop yawning today. It's not because of the action on the track. The action on the track is actually spectacular, especially for what I was expecting here. But yeah, you want to venture out early. You want to venture out whilst you're not under threat. You want to venture out to get that information, to get that read on guys. And if you actually keep your eyes on Polo Hernandez, he's now spotted it, and he's actually doing it himself.
Right now, he is in that 8th position. Highest driver with the freshest tires as they currently run. Ooh, things got a little congested there off of 2. As that was Charles Teed, who had to move to the inside of Gary Corley. Also had Wagner that took a look there on Rick Ravon, and now actually might take another look here off of 4 onto the front straightaway. Meanwhile, up at the front, you got Henry Bennett showing the way, and Nick DeGroot, this is the highest we've seen him in the running order the entirety of the season. Right now holding down 2nd place, of course, former champion back in Season 2, had 5 wins during the course of that year. He went to victory lane twice last season and finished 3rd in the overall standings there, and obviously looking for a little bit of redemption here this season, because I think a lot of people looked at Nick DeGroot heading into last year.
Hang on, Seth. There's a big fight. Maleska's just sent it. He's got past Paulo Hernandez, and he's trying to get past Gary Corley as well. They're neck and neck coming down this back straight.
And this is the fresher tires. About 7 lap fresher tires to the inside. Could not complete the pass there on Gary Corley, though. And we got a caution.
Target. That was not his target. His target was just getting past Paulo Hernandez. Everyone's checking up.
As it was a wreck over in turn 4, Gale Brooks, and I believe that was the lap machine of Jimmy Drynan getting into it. So Drynan is 3 for 4 in being involved in tonight's yellow flags. Gale Brooks was running towards the tail end of the field, but had kept himself on the lead lap the entirety of this race up to this point.
That'll probably be him done too if he's been collecting in that wreck, because he's got no fast repair left. I mean, he had to run clean. He had to basically look after himself as much as possible.
Watch up ahead there, the 99 of Jimmy Drynan. Oh, he makes contact with another car. I think that's Kobe Moore in the 15, who was to his inside, and nowhere for the 71 of Gale Brooks to be able to go. You can see the damage on the right front wing on the 71. Gale does have a fast repair available, but as you mentioned with Jimmy Drynan, it looked like the entire rear wing was gone off that machine, and he had already used his fast repair back on lap 11, so more than likely either his day is done or he's going to be sitting on pit road for some pretty extensive repairs. Was already running 3 laps down, and this is just going to put him further and further behind the 8 ball.
What? I'm having a look at the rear end of that Jimmy Drynan car too. That looks interesting without a rear wing structure. It almost looks like it works.
Kind of reminds me of those old slot cars.
Yeah, I was about to say something along that sort of, we've got Formula Fords out here, which is very similar to the Formula Vs that iRacing has just added with a fair bit more power. And it reminds me quite a lot of those, except for, you know, it still has a lot of wing and bodywork structure, side pods, the whole deal. So, but anyway, look, it's interesting. It's great to know. I'd say that's pretty much going to be Drynan's night done, unfortunately for him. Mike Tellier has had a phenomenal race so far. All of a sudden, he's running such a long way up here. He's doing a phenomenal job, and all of a sudden, he's played himself into contention. He hasn't taken a pit stop here. He's the only car not to have taken a pit stop here. And when you look at where everyone else is, actually, no, there's a fair few cars actually just in behind him. In fact, most of the field that didn't take stops that last bar have come in, and a lot of the cars that did take stops have not come down once again. Maleska's looking for track position. He doesn't want to get mired in traffic. He wants to see if he can get past Mike Tellier on the restart and then disappear up the road. That's his goal. So,
yeah, for Mike Tellier, he has not been to pit road in the last 2 cautions. Drivers Maleska back to Jeff Highsong, second back to 7th. Those guys were last on pit road back on lap 49. So they've already got slightly fresher tires than the 97. I got to wonder about the strategy here from Mike Tellier as well. I mean, is he maybe trying to save an extra set of tires in case we get a late race restart, give himself that little bit of an edge over the rest of the field? Because as we've seen on these last couple of restarts, with drivers off sequence by anywhere from 7 to 9 laps as far as their tires to the competition around them, it hasn't made that much difference.
no, and I mean, the biggest issue is being fuel mileage, and the way that these cars work as well with their pit stops, you take tires whenever you come down for a fuel stop, because the fuel stops are, in essence, very similar to the length of the tire stop, and you do both at the same time, whereas a lot of the GT-style cars, you know, they separate their styles of pit stops. That's a safety thing, obviously not an issue. And American-style racing, safety in the pit lane's not a major issue, if we're going to be perfectly honest. It's just something that you deal with in America in oval-style racing. So, look, there's an interesting opportunity here for Mike Tellier. He hasn't had tire fall off. The guys around him haven't had tire fall off. He's been in traffic, and I have a feeling that Tellier's been looking after those tires as well. He hasn't been pushing the car anywhere near as hard. So, tire fall off? Yeah, it's there, but I think the fuel mileage is just too short for the tire fall-off to be a thing. That's what I'm getting. I mean, there could be some guys who are struggling, especially if they're being forced to make overtakes. Robert Maleska's the guy that I'm most concerned about, but I think he's actually good. He's got the skill to look after those tires to the degree he needs to.
Getting ready for our 4th restart of the day. Tellier back up through the gears, opens up a little bit of distance between himself and Maleska the third. It's going to be about 2.5, 3 car lengths he'll have in hand going into turn 1. Maleska going to run about a half groove, almost a full groove higher, try and get a run down this back straightaway. And so far, 4 cautions here tonight. In those 4 cautions, 2 of them have been solo car spins. The other 2 have been only really 2 car incidents, so kind of minute incidents here so far in this race, but now we're into the second half of this race. So does that change? Do we continue to see these somewhat small cautions, or do we start to see the cautions and the damage level ramp up even more, getting close to the checkered flag?
Well, you got to remember that most of the cautions have been with Drynan as well, so he's now effectively been null and voided from the race, so it's been relatively clean. The drivers are creating about as much space for each other as they possibly can. Everyone's sort of cognizant that it's difficult. You know, everyone's struggling. Nobody's forcing the issue. And the standard and the respect that's being shown is extremely high levels. So, you know, I'm not too...
Oh, we got a spinner!
Oh.
That's Bronson Stafford, who was in the middle of an almost 3-wide situation there in 3 and 4. Brooks spins it around as he was trying to avoid the 61 off of turn 4 as well. I don't think Brooks hit anything, but a lot of damage sustained on Bronson Stafford, second in the points. And we'll go back and look at this, but Bronson Stafford was back in a very difficult situation because there were a lot of drivers around him that had just been to pit lane and had those fresher tires. Nick DeGroot, Rick Ravon, Henry Bennett, they were all back in that situation.
It's like you said, 3 wide. He's got to create space on the outside. He's got to create space on the inside. I can't tell. It's one of those difficult ones. Where did he come down? Or did the car underneath him come up? Yeah, he come down. Yeah, that one's on Bronson. He'll have a look at that. He'll be a little bit annoyed with that, but he'll learn from it. He's got fast repair, so he's not dead in terms of race scenario. Rick Ravon, I think, caught the fence slightly as well, so you might see him come down and get that car fixed up. That's a nightmare scenario for Rick Ravon because he needs to, you know, clean things up, do what he possibly can to get himself back in the action. This is interesting. This is interesting.
I mean, on board here with Rick Ravon, and yeah, he not only gets the wall, but he also actually had some contact with the 61, and that's the risk that you run. We'd seen when he was back in traffic that he would run right up there in that outer groove to make forward progress. Unfortunately, doesn't matter the fact that there's a somewhat limited banking here at New Hampshire. There still is banking, so if a car gets in trouble, it's more than likely going to drift up to the wall, and that's where the lane that you're running. So Rick Ravon having to come down pit road, our pole sitter, and I was going to touch on the fact, and now we can actually add a few more drivers to the list. Up to that caution, we had only had 3 drivers that had to utilize their fast repair: Jimmy Drynan, Gail Brooks, and also Jeff Highsong. Well, you can now also add Rick Ravon and Bronson Stafford to that list.
Yeah, look, I mean, Bronson Stafford's now playing himself into contention potentially as well. There's a few things that are playing themselves out for. I'm just going to point out that I'm currently getting a little bit of flack for my call on that. Look, it's difficult. Let's analyze the scenario from all 3 drivers' sort of perspectives on that caution. You've got, I believe it was Jeff Highsong on the bottom side. That's he's attempting to make an overtake. He's trying to send that car nice and deep. He just about holds his line. Like it's difficult because the natural line here is to start high and then dip low. Right? That's what you really, really want to be doing in all of the corners here to maximize your line. But you don't want to be dipping all the way down. And then if you get all the way down, you're losing so much momentum that the car naturally wants to drift itself back up. It's a difficult scenario. Bronson had to create space for the car that was on the outside on the entry. He's done so. He's tried to then get back to the power, and he's cut down a little bit. I mean, it's a difficult. It's like Stafford, if you're going to put it... I mean, I didn't really necessarily have a direct look at what Highsong did in that one. But from my mind, he actually stayed directly within his groove markings. See, this is what do you analyze it as a driver? That's the perspective that I'm taking from it. As a driver, if I was in Bronson Stafford's shoes, I'd have a look at that and go, look, I mean, it's difficult. He's held his groove markings, so therefore I kind of can't blame him for that one. That one's more on me. But then again, you put it on the car. It's just a 3-wide situation. It's tough. Management of it is incredibly tough as well.
Well, very few drivers came down pit road under this caution. Polo Hernandez, Jim Brooks, of course Rick Rayvon, Bronson Stafford to get some damage repair done to their machines. Gail Brooks as well down pit lane. So only 6 drivers in total elected to come down pit road under this caution period, which is now over. Took about 80 laps, but Robert Maleska III is going to lead us back to green. First time that he enjoys the clean air out front here at New Hampshire.
Yeah, really good opportunity for him here as well. We've seen that he's had the pace, the ability to overtake within traffic, but like, whether or not he can show that now that he's got a fresh sort of fresh air in front of him, fresh air is definitely where you want him to be all night long.
And here's a guy I would keep an eye on, Nick DeGroot, because back during that rather short run, he was actually making a lot of forward progress with his fresher tires on the outside line. And he's now up in the 3rd position. He has a 13-lap advantage on the top 2 ahead of him. Jim Herrick first on his hit list, and then the race leader, Robert Maleska III. So Nick DeGroot, the former champion, looking like he might be having some plans to march his way back up to the front. Makes the move to the inside in 1 and 2 on Herrick. Doesn't clear him off of 2, however. And then you had Henry Bennett back there out of shape as he's trying to take 4th from Jeff Heisong.
Yeah, that's it. You know, there's racing right up and down the field now. We're starting to get closer and closer to the race actually resolving itself. DeGroot's gotten up to the high line. He's managed to get clear of Herrick, and Herrick's going to have to make the overtake on the underside if he wants to get by him, and he doesn't. So that means Nick DeGroot gets his place, and now by running that lower line, Herrick has made himself extremely weak in terms of momentum, and Bennett shows the nose.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, a couple of the incidents we've had, the last couple of cautions, have been a driver on the inside line trying to make a pass, and then the contact initiated between both cars in said battle. We've really seen a lot of the forward progress with guys like Rick Rayvon, Nick DeGroot just there, Maleska III. It's actually been on the outer portion of the racetrack. So it kind of seems to me if it comes down between 2, 3, 4 drivers at the end of this race to win, it's going to be whoever's able to get themselves up to that high line and whoever's able to get that good momentum off the corner, because I'm getting the feeling that inside line's just not going to work if you're going to try and make a pass for the win.
Yeah, if it's last lap and you're trying to make that dive for the win and you need to go somewhere, I'd be banking on that high line. And I'm pretty sure that most of these guys would be aware of that now. They need to make the pass on the high side. The low line works, but the low line only works when you haven't got somebody on the outside of you. The reason for that is as you get back on the gas, you can run the car all the way back up to the wall. If you've got somebody on the outside, you can't get back to the throttle as quickly and as aggressively because you don't have the ability to run the car as high. There's another car there. You can't just drive through that guy. That's just never going to work.
Get back here around the 7th position. That's where Gary Corley actually is going to get the wall there off of 4. And we got caution. It's Polo Hernandez. Last week's runner-up, he was flipping on the front straightaway there.
He's towed. He's immediately back in the pits. I wonder if he hasn't gone over the barriers. That is brutal. Absolutely brutal.
After his 2nd place finish last week at Road America, came into this race 22 points out of the points lead, 5th in the overall standings. And remember, he was one of the few drivers that elected to come to pit road under this last caution, so he was way back in traffic. We'll go back and see what happened. That's Jim Brooks in the 51 behind him. Just ahead is the Kobe Moore, number 15. And it looks like it's going to be Brooks that gets him right there. And wow, as soon as that front wing, the front nose hit the inside wall, it's almost like it grabbed it and wouldn't let it go.
Yeah, unfortunate for him. That's made heavy contact with the inside barrier. It's kind of impaled itself melded itself with the wall a little bit. It's disappointing. That's really, really disappointing because Polo Hernandez has a strong race going. Yeah, it was a little bit out of sequence in terms of pit stops, but that's also what happens. You know, when you're pushing that hard, when you're trying to make the overtakes, eventually something's going to give like that. It was the car in front of him. I believe it was the 51. I think he called it correctly. No, it wasn't Jim Brooks. It was Kobe Moore. Moore tries to get on the power. His car just slightly steps out. He's done a great job of not losing a lot of momentum and gathering the car back up and getting it back in line. He's lost enough momentum that Polo Hernandez has to get out of the throttle, and the car that's underneath Hernandez, which I believe he called correctly was Brooks, didn't have a choice. He was already there. He wasn't cognizant of what was happening on the outside lane. It's very tough to be from the position that he was in as well, and he just can't get the car back under control. That's disappointing for both drivers.
Well, back-to-back cautions here. We're only a few drivers towards the tail end of the field that like to come down pit road. So this says to me that if you're Maleska the Third, DeGroot, Jim Herrick, Henry Bennett, Matt Wagner, you're not giving up that track position until you get around that target lap where you can make your final pit stop of the day.
Yeah, well, you got to remember, from the situation that we're in, there is only one stop to go. No matter what strategy you're on, there is one stop to go. The other thing is, with these cautions now starting to happen back to back to back, you want to leave it as late as possible to come down pit road. What's the reason for doing that? Well, okay, all right. There's two ways to go. Once you hit that target lap number, you can come down, but the issue is you mire yourself back in traffic, and that risk factor comes up. It comes up, it comes up, it comes up, right? Now, if you go down pit lane on the green, you're a lap down, there's nothing you can do, right? You're kind of screwed effectively. So these drivers are not looking to come down pit lane on the green. They're going to run as long as they possibly can whilst the green flag is in the air, because they just don't want to risk it. And there's a couple of drivers who have already been caught by that. In terms of caution pit scenario, well, once we hit that lap marker, I'm coming down. But when I do so, I am coming down with the onus on me to be extremely careful. Now, remember what I said back at the start of the race? Get yourself to that last pit window with a clean car. That now gets thrown out the window because of the caution scenario that's starting to play itself out. Cautions, precautions, the reason why, more cars closer together on track, more car interactions, it gets a little bit crazy that way. So, why do I want to come down as early as possible? I want to put myself in a position where all the other cars ahead of me now have to pit. That hands me track position in the latter half of the race. I give up track position earlier to generate track position later. That relies on there being more cautions.
We will definitely see if there will be more yellow flags in the future of this race. We're working our 6th caution of the night here at New Hampshire. And again, we talked about this top of the program, and it kind of bears reiterating. It's the first time that the Dark Horse Racing Series has taken to New Hampshire with their Indy cars. And so obviously a lot of unknowns for these guys coming into this race. Not a whole lot of track time in the past for these guys in this series, since these are the first laps they've actually turned at the Magic Mile under the Dark Horse banner. So up to this point, still only 6 cautions with a track with a whole bunch of unknowns. These guys have done a pretty good job of keeping it, for the most part, under the green flag with some good long green flag runs, and certainly looking like, as you just alluded to there, that we are in for a race that might end with some pretty interesting pit strategy.
Yeah, it's just about getting your head switched on. The drivers have got a lot of opportunity to cool down about now. Cautions are extremely boring from a driver's perspective. You're trying to save as much fuel as you possibly can. That's about the only crucial factor.
Look at that move by Nick DeGroot around the outside of Robert Maleska III. I don't think even Maleska knew that DeGroot was there. All of a sudden, he looks at his windshield, and he's running P2. DeGroot is pulling away. Now, bear in mind, he does have fresher tires than Robert Maleska III, but DeGroot has kind of shown that he's got equal, if not slightly better, long-run speed as well than the 91. So let's see what Nick DeGroot's going to be able to do here on this run. Obviously, these drivers shooting for around that target lap, somewhere between lap 113 to 115. They should be able to make it the rest of the way on fuel. And based off the numbers we were given, obviously we had some pace laps here, but we're only maybe 10 laps out from guys like Maleska, Jim Herrick, Jeff Heisong actually having to hit pit road.
Yeah, because when did they last pit? Lap 59, lap 60? So they've had multiple caution runs. They're probably able to save somewhere in the realm of 8 to 10 laps worth of fuel. So I think that they can get to that critical lap number of the 110 mark. It's going to take some fuel strategy from them, which is what Robert Maleska was probably doing those early phases. Now, the tires, you talked about it. Have a look at the different layout, or the different turning points, the different driving styles that both of these drivers out in front are taking right now. Nick DeGroot is coming down a lot later. Maleska is getting into the corner and getting to the low side very, very early in the corner. What that does is it makes you check up very, very... so you've got 2 ways to go about it. You can either drive it a fair bit deeper in terms of pace, you drift up a lot earlier in the corner, and then you'll lose a lot of exit momentum, which is quite bad around these sorts of tracks. I don't think Maleska's doing that. I think he's going the opposite direction. I think that he is slowing down a little bit earlier, getting the car turned, getting the car back on the power as much as possible, maintaining as much of that straightaway momentum as possible, because he's got that aero benefit of the car in front.
101 degrees out here now. Track's cooled off a little bit since the start of this race. We were looking around 112 degrees for track temp when the green flag dropped to initially start this race, but still we're up in the triple digits. And as we saw what you were describing there with the two drivers running two different lines, does one line in particular wear tires more than the other, or just based on the fact that the track conditions we're dealing with, it's a kind of 50-50?
Look, I'm going to go back again and say that fuel window, yeah, one of these lines will wear the tires a little bit more. It's the one that's, whenever you carry more pace into the corner, you're asking more of the tire, right? So whoever's driving deeper into the corner will be wearing that tire. It doesn't matter which line that you're taking. The arc that Nick de Groot is actually taking, it's what we call a late apex in terms of a road strategy, which is where you turn in very, very late. You're opening up the corner, though. You're making the corner a lot more straighter on the back end of it. So I think that de Groot is probably wearing a lot less tire than Maleska, but given the stage of the race that we're in, it's going to be quite minimal, especially with Maleska on low fuel.
Obviously, we've seen a lot of drivers gain track position based off of pit strategy, and one of those is Jim Herrick. Good run here by the 40 machine. He's trying to hold off last week's winner, Henry Bennett, for the third spot, but right now, Jim Herrick, he's looking for his first top 5 on the season. An 11th and a 9th place finish in the first 2 races so far this year. Obviously, the most competitive we've seen him so far this season, and he's been one of those drivers that's been able to utilize the pit strategy to his advantage and then maintain the spots that he gained.
Yeah, he's been not necessarily. You can't really block in these cars. It's not about blocking. It's just about running the lines that make it very difficult for the cars around you to pass. And have a look at Matt Wagner, who just sent it a long way down in there onto the corner to try and get clear of Jim Herrick, slide up the track, get back into the power. Herrick just got in the power on the outside, drove around him again. So Wagner's got to build that gap. But as soon as the guys get past him, they put a lot of space on him. Look at how far Henry Bennett has already galloped away.
Right now, about roughly 4 car lengths, maybe 5 car lengths here down the back straightaway as he runs 1.2 seconds behind the second place Robert Maleska III, who in turn is now 0.7 of a second behind Nick de Groot. Another driver that is really moving to the front is our pole sitter, Rick Ravon. He's worked his way now up to the 8th position. He's got about a second before he gets up to his next competitor, which would be Dylan Moskowitz for 7th place. But Rick Ravon, let's bear in mind, he is a faster pair in the hole. So now, do you change the mentality of trying to charge to the front, or do you play it a little bit more conservative? Because we've still got 45 laps to go.
You got to remember that Robert Maleska himself is actually incredibly fuel compromised. There's a chance that he gets to the lap 110 number at the moment. He is one of these drivers that is able to make the fuel mileage do exactly what he needs it to. So if anyone on the track is going to be good, it's going to potentially be Robert Maleska. But he is the last, he's on the longest out there, right? He's pitted the most laps to go, which means he is at the really tail end of the tank. So the benefit is, he'll have a lot of pace. There's not as much fuel sloshing around that car. That means there's less weight. That means the turning ability of the car gets improved because you're not trying to force the weight to go around. You know, it's automatically going to do that. So he's got options here. Does he push once he hits his fuel window? Make sure that he's got enough fuel in the tank? Yeah. You want to step the pace up. You want to go down and try and chase down Nick de Groot. But remember, we said that it's incredibly difficult to make those overtakes. So right now, I actually think he's going in the opposite direction. I think he's saving as much fuel as he possibly can. Get to the latest lap number he possibly can, just in case the caution flies, in which case he gets off the hook.
Lap 110 on the board, and Jim Herrick will dive onto pit lane for potentially his final pit stop of the day, which means we could expect to see Jeff Hysong and Robert Maleska III on pit lane in the next couple of laps. One thing that I've been noticing here is the telemetry of the laps that these drivers are running. I've wondered about the possibility of drivers maybe trying to use the undercut here on their final pit stop, and all the way through the field, these guys are only running 2 to 3 tenths slower than the fastest laps they've put down here today. That's not a whole lot. So I'm not really certain if anybody trying the undercut strategy, if it's really going to gain them that much in terms of track position if we complete this green flag pit stop cycle under the green flag.
So this is going to play Robert Maleska. He's got a lot to do, but I don't think he has much of an opportunity, to really play himself in. This has to go perfectly. If there is a caution right now, Maleska's race is done. Put an X through it. He's going to be at the tail end of the field. He may get a wave around, but he'll be right at the back of the pack. That's a lot of overtakes that he'll need to make. He has no option. This is the way his strategy's played out, so he is run it as perfectly as he possibly can. Now it's up to everybody else. When do they start to come down pit lane? Like I said, I think these guys are going to wait for the very last possible moment before they pit.
Yeah, let's not forget that back in the early portions of this race, we saw Rick Ravon and Henry Bennett. Actually, that was Matt Wagner. They dove onto pit road, lost a lap, and then the caution came out. Now, Wagner was able to take the wave around. Rick Ravon was the lucky dog driver, so they were able to get back in the lead lap. But, Wagner's been able to keep his nose clean, but we saw Rick Ravon pretty much get himself mired back in traffic for a majority of the runs after that, just because of that untimely caution, putting him way off pit sequence and putting him towards the rear of the field, even caught him up in one of our cautions. So that's something that guys like Maleska III and Jim Herrick do not want to have happen as well if an untimely yellow comes out here in the next few laps.
Yeah, and something else that I've immediately noticed about Robert Maleska is now that he's out of that fuel window, now that he doesn't have to save, he's pushing. He's overtaking a lot of cars. He's come out right in the middle of the pack, about that 10th spot on track margin. So there's right now a fair few drivers out there that are saving fuel, trying to go as long as they possibly can and then get that overcut. What they'll do is once the cars around them start to come down to pit road, they'll push as hard as they possibly can for as long as they possibly can. Why? Track space has just opened up. Instead of having to make those overtakes, which we said are incredibly difficult, now they no longer have to make the overtakes. They can just push. The overtakes will happen because they run faster than their opponents, whilst their opponents aren't in the way to force them to make that overtake. So right now, I think there's probably 3 or 4 cars that are doing that within the mid pack. Bronson Stafford's one of the ones I'm looking at. Mike Telly is an option for it as well. Telly is actually, I think, just on pit road.
And so too is Matt Wagner in the 11.
Oh, sorry. Was Jim Herrick, no?
Yes, the 11 car. Matt Wagner, who comes down from outside of the top 5. And here comes DeGroot, actually, onto pit lane as well. Expect to see him, as well as Henry Bennett, Charles T. These are going to be drivers we'll see on pit lane in the next 2 or 3 laps. The guy right now, that should he choose to go as far as possible on what he's got in the tank, that'd be the 2 car, Rick Ravon. He was last on pit road back on lap 91, so he could be able to go roughly about another 20, maybe 22 laps max on what he's got. He can't obviously make it to the end of this race, but if there's somebody that wants to trap a bunch of the field a lap down, look at that 2 car to maybe be the one to play that strategy.
Yeah, I definitely feel like Rick Ravon is going to go as long as he possibly can. The other benefit is he only needs to take a splash. He may not even necessarily take tires at this next stop. That's the benefit. And here comes Henry Bennett now, so obviously he can only run a couple extra laps longer. I was expecting him to push as hard as he possibly can the instant the guys around him came to pit load. That's exactly what happens, and now it's all in Rick Ravon's hands. How long can he go? The next driver to have pitted late is Gail Brooks, and then we've got Corley, Tellier, and Peterson.
Gail Brooks, according to what I've got here, would have been the last driver on pit lane since we ended up going back green. Currently only 28 laps into his stint. We saw Bennett on pit road with Charles T. Dylan Moskowitz also ducked onto pit road. And if we're looking potentially, Scott, at the battle for the win when all this cycles around, Maleska III has bypassed Nick DeGroot. He's only a little less than 0.3 of a second ahead of him, though.
Yeah, this is going to be an on-track fight for the win. I think we're actually in a window right now where there's potential for everything to sort of just play itself out on track. The driver, like I said, everything's cleaned up. All of a sudden, Maleska's under threat, though. Here it comes.
And it's going to be DeGroot trying to pin Maleska behind the 51 of Jim Brooks. Not quite able to get the power down there out of turn 4. Has to tuck back in line. Brooks right now is the race leader ahead of these two, so if they're able to get around the 51, they have raced their way back onto the lead lap without having to have the 51 come to pit road and get their lap back that way.
Yeah, there's an interesting option here as well.
Matt Wagner has run into issues off of turn number 2. Other drivers involved as well. Jeff Heisong has been collected up, and I believe that's Mike Tellier in the 97.
No. Well, if Tellier can get this fired up and going again, he's good, right? He's still going to be in the top 5. Potential. Oh my word! What is happening? We've got to do some unraveling.
That's Gary Corley there. No front nose, no rear wing. What in the world happened here off of turn number 2 and onto the back straightaway? 3-4 drivers collected up in this one, 2 of which were running up inside of the top 5 as they were, and it starts with the 11 of Matt Wagner, who had just taken on tires. He's actually going to make some contact with, I believe,
Henry Bennett.
Yeah, that is. You're right. The 007. 3 wide situation with Bronson Stafford to his outside.
Oh man, that is. He nearly saved it too. Matt Wagner's done about as best a possible job. Everything else that happens after that, he's trying to save the car. You've got to remember that. Matt Wagner is trying to keep his race alive. He's not trying to hit any of these guys. He's just in a bad spot. There's nothing the guy can do.
A car that he clipped, I believe, was the 7 of Gary Corley, who then gets sent up into the air by Mike Tellier, and then Jeff Hysong also enters into the vicinity. A lot of air caught by that 7 machine.
Have a look at Jeff Corley on the crawl back to pit lane. He is full right hand locked down. He's turning the wheel as hard as he can to the right. That is how bad his car wants to turn to the left. That is the pure definition of a crab. Right there. That is walking sideways.
Yeah, big time suspension problems for him. As I believe he was able to take on a faster pair, but my goodness, let's go back and see. Actually, Gary Corley, I don't know if you just saw it there, but when he was coming to pit road, he bended into the pit lane entry wall.
So the reason that happens to the guys at home, with the full lock in, if you actually go into the cockpit cam, he can't see anything. He's looking at his steering wheel right now. That's what he's seeing. So he can't. He's trying to look for everything that he possibly can around him. He's got little to no visibility. So there's not a huge deal that guy can do. He's doing already everything that he possibly can to get that car back to pit lane. That is just what happens. You know, when you can't see anything out of the car, and the reason why drivers in real life park these things when they're that damaged, they don't have the option of a fast repair, and it is dangerous to drive them back to pit lane in that sort of condition. Gary Corley's position, he wants to get the car back to pit lane so he can grab that fast repair, come back out. If he tows, he loses a lot of time sitting still, and he doesn't get that option. It is shorter time period to drive that car back to pit lane.
You know, you talked about Mike Tellier and the need for him to get back to pit road because it would keep him on the lead lap. Well, that actually was the case. He's maintained his track position. Yes, he did take on a faster pair, but he's going to be restarting up there in the 4th position behind race leader now Jim Brooks. Bronson Stafford lines up in 2nd, Gale Brooks in 3rd, Tellier, who we just mentioned, in 4th, and Robert Maliska III is now up in the 5th position. A number of drivers from 6th place on back had to take the wave around since Maliska got the lucky dog. So DeGroot, Henry Bennett, Rick Rabon, Jim Herrick, Charles Teed, all of these drivers are back on the lead lap, but they were not allowed to pit under this caution period.
Maliska, that is exactly where I was about to go as well. Robert Maliska gets the lucky dog because he was in front of Nick DeGroot at that time, can pit, so he's got fresh tires on. Here we go. This restart is going to be big. You've got a group of cars. They're going to be behind Robert Maliska III. They're going to be trying to get themselves back up there in contention. Jim Brooks leads this race. Bronson Stafford is 2nd. Gale Brooks and Mike Tellier are your top 4. And these are the guys that are ahead of the lap traffic.
Jim Brooks has had a good start to his season. He had that top 3 finish back in the season opener at Michigan, and then followed up with a top 10 run last week at Road America, looking for his first win on the season. I believe first win of his Dark Horse Racing Series career as well. Bronson Stafford, who has finished 2nd place, and I believe it was 3rd last week at Road America, if I remember correctly. He's trying to finish up there in the final spot in the podium that he hasn't finished all season long, and he looks back to Gale Brooks. Good run for the Brooks right now.
Yeah, really good job for those guys. I mean, remember, like I said, you have to run long on that final stop because the caution just plays you completely and only out of contention. Have a look at where Robert Maliska is, though. He's having trouble in traffic. get the lucky dog. What's the rules when you get the lucky dog? You have to go to the real end of the pack. So he is by far and away probably one of the fastest cars on track right now. He has to fight his way through lap traffic because the lap traffic is competing with each other for positioning.
And there are a lot of battles going on back there. Rick Ravon trying to pick up a spot on Henry Bennett. That is for the 7th spot. Just ahead, there's Nick DeGroot in the 89, who was up at the front not too long ago. And there is the 91 of Robert Maleska III just up ahead of these guys. He's going to have to deal with Polo Hernandez, who's right now 2 laps down. He's not too far away from the 97 of Mike Tellier. About 2 cars ahead is where Tellier is in that 4th position. But while he's only 0.6 of a second behind 4th place, he's about 2.5 seconds behind the race leader, and we're at less than 20 to go.
Look at the battle that's forming in behind Bronson Stafford as well. You got Jimmy Drynan. Jimmy Drynan on that restart just put the boot into it and completely and utterly blew past Mike Tellier. So Tellier's struggling. He's not having as clean a night as he necessarily wants. He's not getting the car to turn the way that he wants. Jim Brooks has bolted. Remember what I said about clear air out in front of this thing? That's so important. Now Bronson Stafford has clear air because he's burst through the arrow wake, the draft sort of pockets, and now all of a sudden Bronson Stafford's car starts to come alive, which means it's so much harder for Gale Brooks to get on by him.
These are the first laps that Jim Brooks has led the entirety of this season so far, and who knows, he might lead the most important lap here today and finish that final magic mile here at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, as he is going to take and hit the line this time by for 15 laps to go. That battle for 2nd place continues on. We've now got a battle for 4th going on behind them. Mike Tellier looks back behind, and here comes Robert Maleska III to the inside.
I think he looks behind, and here comes Robert Maleska. I think as he looks to the left-hand side mirror, and he sees Robert Maleska sending it down the inside, and I think this pass will get done right here.
And it will indeed. Looks like Maleska's going to clear him before they even get to the center of the corner. Now that's the 15 of Kobe Moore down the inside. He is the first car 1 lap down. He'd love to see a caution right now so he could get back on the lead lap as these laps continue to dwindle down towards the end of this race. Jim Brooks, though, 2.3 seconds back to Bronson Stafford. You know, the last thing he wants to see is a caution flag.
Yeah, because all of a sudden, all that work that he's done, it brings Robert Maleska so much closer, so much further back up into play. So he wants to see this run green. He's done a great job on this restart. He's ticked every box that he needs to tick. And all of a sudden, I think Maleska's nearly on the rear bumper of Gale Brooks and Bronson Stafford here as well.
And he's also going to run the tire tracks of the lap machine of Jimmy Drynan, so that's going to be really tight there from 2nd back to 4th. Looks like Drynan's going to bow out of that graciously and leave those 3 to battle for the runner-up spot. This again taking place 3 seconds behind the race leader, and we can't say that this is a gimme win to Jim Brooks, because if you look back in qualifying, he qualified his way up in the 7th position. He was actually at the top of the board at one point during the qualifying session, so he's definitely got speed in that machine, and he's showing it off here late.
Well, you can't say it's a gimme win anyway, because Jim Brooks had to play the strategy card, and he's played it perfectly. This isn't the first time in terms of strategy he's been towards the front of the field. Here comes Robert Maleska, though.
He's going to try to the inside of Gale Brooks for 3rd. Might try and look for
Stafford.
a 2 for 1. Yeah, here trying to go 4th to 2nd. Oh, but he's not able to clear either one of them here. Can't get up to that high side, so we'll see if maybe Stafford can hold him off. Not quite. Ooh, that's close. I think Maleska tried to self-clear himself off of turn 2. They almost made contact at the 91 and 61, but Maleska now moves to the runner-up spot. He's got 10 laps to work with to close down 3.3 seconds between himself and Jim Brooks.
Yeah, all of a sudden, Jim Brooks is going to be looking in that rearview mirror and saying, uh-oh, Matt Wagner's still out there crawling around without a rear wing. I was about to say, is Matt Wagner driven his way through the field? No, he's going backwards. Wagner's going to pull off to the side here.
Yeah, Matt Wagner, actually, surprisingly enough, did not take on a faster pair. I'm not certain that...
He may have accidentally taken one earlier in the evening. So,
yeah.
For those of you who don't know, the fast repair, within your pit stop window, the fast repair is automatically ticked. And if you have any sort of liquid damage, whether that be floor damage that you can't see, that's something that's not affecting your overall pace of the car, you come down pit road and that thing is automatically ticked, it'll take it. So I don't think he's got any choice.
Unless it's a glitch on my end, it says he still has a faster pair to use. So
What?
I'm not really certain why he wouldn't have used it back under last caution. But there's the yellow. It's for Wagner. You gotta wonder if with no rear wing, if maybe that thing snapped on him off of turn 4.
Well, actually, you know what? I don't think he's necessarily aware that he was missing a rear wing. Because it just reminded me that looking back at that last caution, somebody just barely tagged him, and it actually didn't look like there was any issue with his car. Like his car had made the tiniest little bit of contact. It took the rear wing off.
Oh, wow.
So I actually, you know what? Wagner wasn't aware at all that he was missing a rear wing until he tried to get back up to pace.
Well, let's go back.
That was the only contact that happened.
Let's go back and see what happened. And let's see if we can actually pinpoint what you're talking about there with that contact that took the rear wing away, and then we'll look at his spin off of turn 4.
Yeah, so it's the last caution. Not the one we've just had for Wagner, the one before.
See if we can find that here. And boy, this yellow flag, this is not good for Jim Brooks. It looks like it could be very good for Robert Maleska III. Oh, we're going to have ourselves a bit of a shootout here, I think, too. I think we will actually, at least for the time being, be able to finish this race in regulation. And still trying to find that point that you were talking about where...
it'll be lap 123. Lap 123 going into turn 1 and 2.
Yeah, so that was the contact between himself and Henry Bennett that we saw earlier. And he gets that... Here's what I don't understand, though, is he backs it into the outside wall. Oh, yeah, you're right. He actually doesn't back into the outside wall. I think that might have been Covey Moore that came on by, made that slight bit of contact, and took the rear wing off, because you're right, it was there when he came to a stop, so...
There's no way that he... And you have a look at the contact that was made between him and Covey Moore as well. The car just jumped a little bit. You would not expect the rear wing to be missing at that stage. So Matt Wagner's just got no clue that the rear wing was missing. And then it goes back green. And then when it goes back green, the penalty for coming back down pit lane is at least a lap. It's a lap and a half, basically, potentially, to come down pit lane, just grab that fast repair, get the car fueled up again, etc. So he was hoping that there would be another caution. It didn't happen. And then after that point, he's losing more and more time. He got to a point where he either had to come down or something was going to happen, and unfortunately, it was something that happened first. So it's unlucky. It's really, really unlucky.
I'll tell you what, I mean, what a way to start out this season. We had the fuel strategy race back in the season opener at Michigan. We had some pit strategy kind of play out at Road America, but a dominating performance by Henry Bennett. And now we're setting up for a late race restart here at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, a track that these drivers have not been to on the Dark Horse Racing Series schedule.
You know the best part? Jim Brooks is leading. We're going to have... What are we? We're going to cross the line this time by to start lap 148. So we're going to have 3 laps to go. So it'll be 2 laps to go. It is not easy to overtake. Maleska seems to be the only one that's being able to make those moves. Bronson Stafford's in P3. That has championship implications. Henry Bennett is currently our championship leader. He's in P5. Maleska's burning fuel. Maleska just put the clutch in and put the foot to the floor. He's burning extra fuel off. He's got excess fuel on board that he doesn't want.
And we've got the lights out. So we will go back green flag racing. It will be an in-regulation green-white checker here at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. Jim Brooks trying to pick up his first win of his Dark Horse Racing Series career. Maleska III behind him. He's looking for his 11th career win after being a 10-time winner in his championship season last year. Bronson Stafford looking for his 3rd straight top 5 finish. Gail Brooks looking for his second top 5 in 3 races. And Henry Bennett trying to go for back-to-back victories. Here we go. 2 laps to go. 2 miles to go. They stack up there from 4th place on back as Jim Brooks gets away for the time being. Here comes Maleska, though, with a big run into 1.
Keep your eyes on it. There's a little bit of a conversation further back that somebody went and then somebody else didn't, and then that's what caused the check up.
Contact! Maleska's gonna spin Jim Brooks in 3 and 4. Caution is gonna fly. Oh, and he gets hit hard by, I believe that's the 0-1 of Polo Hernandez.
Oh.
Jim Brooks, in a matter of a corner, goes from the race lead to upside down in the center of 3 and 4. Caution is going to fly for the 9th time tonight.
We'll decide it.
And this is going to be interesting to see what the call's going to be. We'll be looking back at numerous camera angles here, but you have to wonder who is the fault for the wreck going to be on, because this kind of reminds me of some of the other incidents we had earlier on tonight with drivers arguing over the same amount of space. It could be that old question of who came up, who came down. Did they do it at the same time? This could be an unofficial win right now for Robert Maleska III, depending on the fallout from that last incident.
How do you call that one?
I don't know.
I'm watching it.
I honestly don't know.
It's tough because the same criticism that was leveled at towards me for the way that I reviewed that incident between Bronson Stafford and I forget who it was that was on the underside of him at that point. It's nearly identical to that one, except it's a lane further down. Like Jim Brooks, he's got a block, right? It's a, would you block for this win? 100% you'd block for this win. You would 100% try and, compromise your competitor. I don't think.
The question I have is, was that a block?
No, it's not. It's not.
Yeah, usually a block is blatant. That just looked like the entry he wanted to take into the corner.
So there's two things to consider here. It's not a block. Now, why doesn't he block? He's blocked far enough, and he realizes that Maleska's going to run, but at the same time, he wants to compromise Maleska's corner entry whilst ensuring that he gets the best corner entry he possibly can. That's why he's going back to the high side. He wants to run as much of a natural racing line as he can, because it means that he maintains his momentum. It means that Robert Maleska won't be able to clear him on the mid corner. Now, you move into the mid corner. All of a sudden, Jim Brooks is trying to take the racing line, and Maleska, as he's entitled to try and make the overtake. Now, in my mind, there's two different sets of rules. Again, this is how I race. Don't take this as this is a race control style of thing. But generally, when there's a car and they get their nose underneath you on an oval, they're entitled to that lower line. It doesn't matter how far along they are. You, as the car that's on the outside, you're always going to get yourself turned in that scenario. It's a tough one to call, because if you look at it, in essence, Maleska holds his line. However, Jim is attempting to take the racing line, right? He's coming down, but he comes down so far, and Maleska's there. Like, it's one of those incidents where there is definitely blame on both drivers.
And we are getting the official word that Robert Maleska III is the winner of tonight's race here at New Hampshire, so he will pick up his second win in the first 3 races. We're going to keep taking a couple of camera angles here at that last incident between the then race leader Jim Brooks and then second place Robert Maleska III. Poor Polo Hernandez, second incident he's been involved in where he flipped. He flipped on the front straightaway earlier on, and then he flipped up into the catch fence over near the entrance of turn number 4. So certainly not the evening he was looking for after his runner-up finish last week at Road America. And the more that I look at this, I don't think that it was a block. I definitely agree, I don't think it was a block. But as I look at it more and more with these angles, especially when I looked at it from the aerial view, it does look like Maleska held the line from entry into the center completely. Brooks kind of entered in high and came down maybe a groove and a half down into the lane that Maleska was running. So it's kind of almost like, not necessarily a block, but almost like a pinch.
Which is fine. Like, all that's fine. And the issue, so what you have to deal with in terms of these ones is, would the cars have made contact? Yeah, they definitely have made contact there. What would the end result of that be? They're so close together, they're going to make contact no matter what happens. I'm trying to get myself a really good angle to show exactly where they are.
Well, results are official as we look at our lmcgear.com race results. Maleska the third with the victory, so his second win on the season, his 12th win of his career. Bronson Stafford continues his amazing start to his first season with another top 5 run, bringing it home second. Dale Brooks going to pick up third. Rick Ravon, who started on the pole, will finish in fourth, and the former champion Nick DeGroot brings it home in fifth. Mike Tellier, after some good pit strategy, despite getting involved in the wreck, still going to be able to grab sixth. Henry Bennett, last week's winner, will bring it home seventh. Dylan Moskowitz, Charles Teed, and Benjamin Combs. That is going to be your top 10 as we look at the remainder of the results. And obviously, Jim Brooks and Polo Hernandez, both involved in that last incident, finishing back there in 15th and 16th place. Matt Wagner, who brought out that last caution, he actually finished this race in the garage area in 18th. So we talked about last week, a lot of drivers after Road America gaining numerous spots in the point standings. The fallout from this race, I think, heading into Chicagoland, is going to be talking about the number of positions lost by a lot of our top contenders.
Potentially, Robert Maleska, though, back to victory lane. He's going to pick himself up a whole swag of points. So whether or not all of a sudden he puts himself to the top of the standings, like, that's an interesting thing to consider. He's back to his winning ways. Like, it's so difficult. It is so difficult.
It certainly was an exciting finish here at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. Whether we had that race restart or if we had maybe tried to see this thing finish under the green flag, but Robert Maleska III is going to be the first multi-time winner on the season. We'll be talking with him momentarily, but we're also going to talk with our other podium finishers, and first time that Gail Brooks will finish on the podium here this season. Let's talk with him now. Hey Gail, it's Scott and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Going good. Well, man, first off, congratulations on your first podium finish of the season. Looked like the pit strategy really worked out in your favor. You were able to maintain it there and bring it home third place, but we talked about the fact a lot of unknowns coming into tonight's race in New Hampshire. First time that you guys took the Indy cars in this series to this mile racetrack. What was your overall opinion of it, and just how difficult was it to adapt?
I would say tempers are definitely a little bit flared during and post race. I'll say I think definitely one of the more ramped up races, if you will. Just the difficulty of passing, just hoping, like you said, their fuel strategy. If you had the pit strategy right, that was a huge one for me to be in that position. I tried all night long to do something different, and at one point I thought I was in the catbird seat, and then I got caught up in a bit of an incident, so that kind of threw me back again. And then that long run where most of everybody had a pit, and then I was able to stay out those couple extra laps, and that finally got me in that position for the track position where I had decent pace. I didn't have the rotation ability of Robert and Henry and those guys, but this was a very difficult one. I'd say really on the mental side, just because you really had to be full aggression, and it was really hard to give an inch that one.
Talk about the difficulty of overtaking in this race. Like, exactly like you said, you had to be full send, and you had to get down to it early, and you had to try and clear the car in the mid corner and then get back to the throttle. And then the guys that were running the higher line, they had the momentum, they were coming back at you. It was a difficult race in terms of car preservation, where to be, how to build the run the whole night long. You were managing gaps like it was going out of crazy. And that battle that you had with Bronson Stafford towards the tail end of the race, that was phenomenal as well. Oh yeah, no, Bronson, I say that's like, I think 2 races now in the past 3 that Bronson and I have been in a really good fight, and just hats off to him, because we put on a really good fight. I did everything I could. But he's raced me clean since I've raced with him. It's only been a couple, but every time I've been around him, he races clean. He's really, really nice guy too, and everything. So it was one of those things you want to race as hard as you can, but if I knew I didn't have the spot, I had to roll out of it a little bit to try to make sure that we both made it through the exit of the turn. And then just unfortunately, I say this, when you do that though, it costs you so much momentum. And then just you kind of have to regroup and do it again. But he was doing everything he had to. I tried to roll the outside on him a couple times, but
he was putting that car in the perfect spot. I just couldn't do anything with him. So it was a lot of fun. Like I said, it was definitely frustrating at times. I'm sure I definitely was agitated at various people at various times, but I'll say one of those things, I'm sure, give us all an hour or two to kind of cool off, debrief, and I'm sure everybody will be kind of back to their normal afterwards.
Now, you talked about how tough it was to pass here. Now, obviously, as we got closer towards the end of the race, closer to that window where you guys could make your final pit stop and be good to the finish, we didn't see very many drivers come down pit road in the cautions we had. But in the first 2 or 3 cautions, we would see about half the field come down pit road, the other half stay out, and then it would flip the following caution. What was the strategy called there? Was it basically trying to just make sure that you had the fuel to get to the target lap? Was there something to be gained with getting fresh tires? Because obviously you're losing out on track position and putting yourself back in trouble.
Yeah, I don't think tires were enough of an issue, just with the difficulty of passing. So my initial thought was, I thought this one was going to be, I mean, obviously there's a decent number of yellows, but I actually thought it was going to be a lot rougher than it was. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to start in the back. I'm just going to kind of let the chaos go and go from there. And it never really happened. We got those like couple single car incidents, things like that. So it didn't really knock too many people out. And then, so basically then at that point, every time I'd be towards the back of the field. So I'd say, okay, I'm going to top off on the one to go, and I'm just going to run this thing as far as I possibly can. I'm going to run long gears and just try to go the furthest I can. And so I was probably I would say about a lap or two away from being the leader. As I know my dad was about to pit when that yellow came out, during that pit stop cycle. So that was kind of my goal, was, all right, I'm gonna go as long as I can. That yellow came out, so I was like, okay, I'm third. I'm all right. This will still work out pretty well. Knowing I have the track position, all the wave arounds and all that, I felt pretty good about that. But my game plan was going to be to run it as absolutely long as I could. The part I was toying with was fuel only, or maybe put some tires on it just to help the grip, because I needed maybe about 5 gallons of fuel, I think, if we had stayed green all the way to the end.
Well, Gail, I mean, no denying a great start to your season. Second top 5 on the season in 3 races. Your third straight top 10 as well. You came into this race 6th in the point stands, and you get your first podium finish of the season here at New Hampshire as well. So certainly got a lot of good momentum going into Chicagoland. We look forward to seeing you continue that when we get to the Windy City next week. But we're now going to give the opportunity for some thank you sponsors and shout-outs.
I really got to thank the guys that were with me tonight in the Discord. I say Matt Wagner, one of those, not the night he was looking for, obviously, but always a really good asset to have strategy-wise and kind of track tips and help you go faster week in, week out. And then Gary Corlane, of course, I would say I'm happy about the third, but I'm gutted for my dad. He was in the perfect spot there. Just unfortunately to say, it was hard racing at the end, and it was just, unfortunately those two got into each other at the end, and I hated to see that for him. I was really hoping we could get even if it was a 1-4, that was going to be really what I was hoping for him. And then you guys, I mean, the broadcasting here is great, and say I've been able to do a lot of kind of back and forth with Matt, with your team as well. So he's been a huge help for me for my own stuff as well. So yeah, I just really got to thank all those guys, with you, and then of course the Dark Horse guys. Sorry, with Eric Peters and Charles T. To say those guys are just top notch, and really enjoy being able to be a part of this league with them.
Well, Gail Brooks brings it home P3 here tonight at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. Best finish of the season, and more than likely will be up inside the top 5 in the points heading into next week at Chicagoland. Congratulations, Gail. Go enjoy your good finish.
You guys, appreciate everything you do.
Let's see if we can now get our second place finisher here tonight. Second runner-up finish for Bronson Stafford this season. Hey, Bronson, Scott and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Yeah, I got you.
Man, first full-time season here for the Dark Horse Racing Series, and 3 straight top 5s to start out the year. Second place finish for you as well, but not without having to do quite a bit of fighting. You were back there in maybe one of the biggest battles that we saw the entirety of this race, that really tough 3-wide situation back just after the round of green flag pit stops. I mean, we kind of were talking about how difficult it is to pass here racing double wide. I mean, how scary is it to be in a 3-wide situation here?
Yeah, the track's so flat. The cars push up so bad with the aero wash. It was hard to tell what was really going on. It was honestly, I wasn't really looking behind me too much. I was just kind of making sure I hit the mark, and I struggled tonight a little bit. I don't know. I felt good in practice, and we got to the race, and I just never really got a handle on after like 10, 15 laps. So I'll take a P2 after tonight.
Bronson, obviously a little bit of race review to do out of that one. I mean, a lot of the time it was coming down from the high line, get it all the way down to the bottom line. The racing line was a little bit all over the track. Racing people was incredibly difficult, especially trying to clear and get those passes done. I mean, how are the arms feeling? How are you feeling at the end of that race? Because it feels like it was a hard one.
Honestly, not too bad. The car drove really good. It was just so hard to pass. So like it wasn't like hard to drive the car. It was just really hard to, try and drive in under someone and clear them without like honestly pretty much pulling a slide job, because once you slid up in front of someone, the dirty air off their back wing, it just made the guy behind just absolutely push towards the wall, and they had to lift, so like you were guaranteed the spot kind of deal. But yeah, I don't know. It wasn't too bad to drive. I feel pretty good actually. A lot better with a P2, but we're just flip flopping the points because I'm still second in points now, but now Robert's the leader again.
Yeah, well, obviously, Bronson, as mentioned, a great start to your season. Next week we go to a 1.5-mile track at Chicagoland Speedway. So, can the momentum be kept up?
I would like to think so. I think the 1.5 miles and 2 miles will probably be where I'm a bit better, like a bit stronger compared to the flat tracks. I'm still getting used to the car, and at least with Michigan, it felt more normal to what I was used to with like a super speedway type deal. And the 1.5 miles kind of drive almost the same, just a little bit more tire wear. So we'll be okay there. Definitely gonna have to put more laps in for the next time we go to a flat track, though, which I think is Gateway or something like that. So we'll see.
Well, Bronson Stafford brings home second place here tonight at New Hampshire. Third straight top 5 finish here this season. And as you heard him say, he's still second in the point stands, 5 points back behind Robert Molesky III heading into Chicagoland next week. Congratulations on another great performance, Bronson. We're now going to give you the opportunity for some thank you sponsors and shoutouts.
Yeah, we got FRN on the car. We're trying to break the FRN curse and get a win with the car, and it's been a solid start to the season so far. So maybe there's a chance somewhere down the line. Smart car and Dallara, all those things. We get put on a good Indy car with a good engine, chassis, all that whatnot, and just pretty much you guys doing a great job with broadcasting. I'm sure this one will be fun to watch back because, in my opinion, from a driver's standpoint, for the first time at New Hampshire, that race was pretty good. So should be fun.
Definitely was exciting, very exciting finish here at New Hampshire, no doubt about that. Bronson Stafford, second place here tonight at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. Once again, congratulations, Bronson. Best of luck next week to try and keep the top 5 streak going at Chicagoland.
Yeah, thanks, Seth.
And another driver that's looking to continue a streak of championships, and boy, he's got himself quite a start to be able to do that. Second win in 3 races here to start out the season. That's Robert Molesky III, our winner here tonight. Hey, Robert, Scott and Seth up here in the FRN booth. You got us?
Yeah, I got you guys.
Well, man, I'll tell you what. Took you about 80 laps to get up there to the front of the field. Then we saw you try and run down the race leader there in the final 15 laps. How much of a sigh of relief were you breathing when you saw that late race yellow come out and evaporate the 3 seconds that Brooks had over you?
Yeah, honestly, to me, all that matters is I feel really bad for Jim. I didn't want it to go like that. I try to give him as much of him as possible because I thought he faked high. He was, breaking the draft down to back, and then it went high, so I thought he was going to commit high since that was the dominant lane all race, so I was just going to take the bottom and was going to try and slide him because I was pretty content with either first or second, but it just, it's a shame it ended like that because he deserved much better.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's difficult on that last restart. I mean, talk to us through your mindset coming to the green. There's 2 laps to go. It's difficult to make a pass here, but you've been doing it successfully all night. What's the goal on that final green?
Yeah, so going into it, stay close going into turn 1. He kind of cut, at least from my memory, I think he cut a little low into turn 1, which gave me a bit of a run off 3 or off 2. So I had a run going in. And then, when I saw him, fake high there, or go high, fake or break the draft, fake low, go high. And then I was just going to turn down, under him like normal, but, unfortunately we had contact.
We saw you, for the most part, really making a lot of your passes on the inside line. We were observing other drivers like Rick Ravon, Nick DeGroot. They were actually making their passes on the top side. Did at any point you decide to maybe try that top line, or were you pretty much committed to how your car handled down there on that inside line to make your forward progress?
Yeah, I was pretty committed on the bottom. I could wrap the bottom pretty well, and not really slide up until corner exit. The top was dominant the whole race, but with everyone running up there, I felt like it was better to at least work the bottom than trying to get by people.
Now, obviously, as we talked about the fact this is the first time that New Hampshire appeared on the schedule, and we talked about how last year, 10 victories, you won the championship, but coming in here tonight at a track that pretty much nobody has run here under the Dark Horse banner, did you feel like it was like a level playing field, and so you had something to prove here tonight, trying to defend that championship?
Yeah, kind of. Historically, I'm not the biggest fan of flat tracks. They're usually one groove, like Milwaukee, but luckily, I got some good luck there with the cautions and the strategy and not having a caution when I was when we were doing green flag pit stops. So that worked to my favor a ton.
Well, Robert, a great start to your season here as you look to be a back-to-back champion in the Dark Horse Racing Series. Second win in 3 races, and you jump back to the top of the point stands as well, heading into Chicagoland. So congratulations on that. We're now going to turn the microphone over to you, let you do some victory, thank you, sponsors, and shout-outs.
Yeah, thanks to Jeff and Dylan being great teammates all season long, and Troy Lead Designs for sponsoring the series. It's great to have them on board.
Robert Maleska III, he celebrates in Victory Lane here tonight at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. Becomes the first multi-time winner here in Season 4 of the Dark Horse Racing Series. Congratulations, Robert. We look forward to seeing if he can make it 3 for 4 next week in the Windy City.
Yep, thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Well, we talked about it pretty much the entirety of this race. First time that New Hampshire appears on the schedule here for the Dark Horse Racing Series. I'll tell you what, we did have 9 cautions during the course of this race, but whether this thing finished with that long green flag run to the end or we ended up having that late race restart, I think New Hampshire definitely delivered in terms of exciting racing and an exciting finish.
Yeah, it comes down to what the drivers think at the end of the day, doesn't it? And like a lot of them said, there was a second groove there, kind of, but you had to send it, you had to force it, which made the drivers think about how they were building their pass. It wasn't easy, it was definitely an interesting race. I was expecting a lot more cautions, a lot more cars to just get caught up, and it didn't happen, which is all power to the drivers. They created good racing for by and large, the majority of the race. And I want to say a big shout out to guys like Polo Hernandez, Jimmy Dryden, who were there at the tail end of that second to last green flag run. They recognized that there were multiple drivers who were fighting each other for lead lap positions, and they got out of the way. They didn't force it. They recognize their race scenario. Sometimes it's very, very difficult to do that, especially if you're racing for positions, but they recognize that they weren't on the lead lap, they were fighting for the minors, and they wanted to let the lead lap battle happen. And ultimately, all around, a really good job by just about every driver in the field tonight. Some unlucky, but, that's racing at the end of the day.
Top 5 in the point stands has had a little bit of a facelift since the start of the race to the conclusion of the race. Maleska III back up to the top of the standings. Bronson Stafford 5 points back in second. Henry Bennett drops from the points lead to third, 11 points out. Rick Ravon holds fourth, and Gail Brooks moves up a spot to the 5th position. But just real quickly to touch on as well, a mile in length, so a lot of people with the way that the racing is, doesn't matter if it's an Indy car or if it's a stock car, they will consider the type of racing we have at New Hampshire very similar to short track racing. And we heard from Gail Brooks some hurt feelings after this race. So obviously they've got a week to be able to think about it, be able to go back and review everything that took place. But obviously you don't really hear about payback in Indy cars, but do we see any fallout from this race later on? Because we know we're going to some other short tracks later on the schedule.
I was just thinking of the driver chat immediately after that. I don't think there'll be payback. Jim Brooks has definitely got a right to be annoyed with the way things that unfolded there at the back end of the race. But, he's a part of that, and he's also got to recognize that he come down a long way in the corner as well, which also made the accident happen. Yeah, Maleska sent it down there on the inside, but Jim didn't have to come all the way down as far as he did. He could have run a little bit of a higher line. His momentum would have been a little bit different, but, at the end of the day, you've got to make sure there's enough of a gap between you so that you can both continue on your race. So he's definitely got to make sure that he takes his part out of that, and he's aware of what happened and how he can improve as a driver. But he's got to come back all power to him. Jim Brooks he's not had the best season so far, but there's been some flashes of brilliance, and he didn't make it easy for Robert to come down there and try and overtake him. He made it difficult, and ultimately neither driver was happy with the way that unfolded. Neither driver wanted the race to finish that way. Robert wanted to race him outright for that position. You could tell that in the way that both drivers were talking to each other at the race. I don't think there's anything in it, Seth.
Well, there were a lot of storylines coming into this debut race for New Hampshire on the schedule, and a lot of storylines leaving it, heading to Chicagoland next week. But the man of the night is Robert Maleska III, the defending champ, goes to victory lane for the second time this season in Season 4 of the Dark Horse Racing Series. We're going to be heading to Chicagoland next week. Scott and I will be here on hand at FRN to call that race. The green flag will be flying at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you guys join us for that. But crazy one here tonight at the slippery track of New Hampshire. Scott, appreciate you joining me in the booth for this one.
Oh man, look, once again, it's another one of those races that I've thoroughly enjoyed. I'm enjoying my time here in the booth, and I'll continue to do so.
Thanks to everyone that tuned in tonight. We hope to see you guys next Wednesday night at Chicagoland for race number 4 of Season 4 of the Dark Horse Racing Series, presented by Troy Lead Designs. For Scott Rankin, I'm Seth Cole. Enjoy the rest of your night as you've been watching another broadcast courtesy of the Flatout Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flatout Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flatout Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flatout Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.